Welcome to Emporia Public Schools podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Allison Anderson Harder, Superintendent. This podcast is our way to provide students, staff, parents, and community members easy access to information on a variety of topics. Below the podcast link, there is a link to an electronic form for anyone to provide feedback or ideas about the podcast you may have just listened to, or to share ideas for future podcasts. Today we are talking to Mrs. Heather Wagner, Student and Family Resource Specialist. Welcome, Heather.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So talk to us a little bit about your role with Emporia Public Schools.
Well, essentially, I work behind the scenes to remove barriers to education for all students in every district building. And that looks very different depending on the student. Sometimes it might be just as simple as a backpack, or they might need supplemental food. So really, it's identifying those kids that need additional help and removing those barriers, whatever they may be.
How do you find out about students who have needs?
I rely very heavily on all district staff. So in the beginning of the year, we do a little video training so they all know what my role is and what we're looking for. And if they identify a student that is lacking any basic necessity, they then refer them to me. So it is imperative that I have everyone's support and knowing exactly, because obviously I can't know every student.
So does this go out to all staff or just to student support specialists and counselors, principals? Who does it go to?
It's all staff. So even bus drivers, our paras, our food service, anyone and everyone that works for the district can always identify kids that need additional resources.
Awesome, because different staff members may have different relationships with students and trust and all of that. So
absolutely, that is 100% key. If someone has a good relationship with a student, they're the best person for us to find out of any needs, because that's who that student feels safest with.
Absolutely. And it's faster, so they can get those resources faster.
Absolutely.
Talk about what types of barriers students in Emporia might face.
Well, typically, I'm going to say, we see the barrier of the basic necessities. So like I already spoke about, they don't have a backpack, they don't have shoes, they don't have clothes. Sometimes though, it can go way beyond that. It can be that maybe there's someone sick at home and they're just not getting the attention they need, or they're living on the verge of poverty. Maybe they're facing homelessness. They could be homeless at the time. So really it's individualized. There's no good way to sum it all up, because there's so many different ways. But obviously anything, if you think about, I think a lot of us take for granted what we have. And so if you think about just the bare basics of what you need to be successful, some of our kiddos don't have those items. So that's what we're trying to address.
Well, and really appreciate that support for students. And it's also very confidential. So you might talk about how that student confidentiality is maintained.
Absolutely. So whoever, like we talked about, the adult that has that great relationship with that student is going to reach out to me and say, hey, I've identified the student. Let's say they don't have any shoes. Can you please help me? So I'm going to say, yes, please find out if there's any additional things that we need for that student and get me sizes. Then I'm going to go do the shopping. And if I don't have it on hand, so we do rely a lot on community support. So if it's been donated and I have it on hand, that's where I'm going to grab it. If not, I'm going to use my funding to go purchase that item and get it to whoever requested it as soon as possible. So I try to make my turnaround time within 2 days. And then once they have that item, I'm going to ask them then to reach out to the student and provide that to the student. So sometimes I don't even know the students' names. If I do, and I'm working directly with that student, again, it's always going to be confidential. At the high school, everyone there kind of knows what I do. So I don't go directly to pull a student. I ask the office to call them down so they don't ever see me walking into the room to ask a student a question. So we always want to protect their confidentiality.
What services are available to students experiencing homelessness?
Okay, so homelessness is kind of a key, tricky thing. I think a lot of people have the idea that I can magically have houses or apartments appear, but that just isn't the case. And in Emporia, we really have a lack of resources for homeless students. So if we have a student that is homeless and we can identify them as homeless, we're going to work very closely with all of our local resources to try to bridge that gap. Like I would normally provide any of my services that we talked about. So I'm going to make sure that they have the clothing that they need. I'm going to make sure that if they're new to our district, they can enroll immediately. If they need their shots, we're going to take care of that. Any physicals, any of those items that they need to be successful. But then after that, we're going to work closely with our resources in our community to try to find the way to bridge that gap. So we used to have Family Promise that we would always refer to, and right now they're not accepting new families. So it is a little bit trickier in just looking for those resources. We rely a lot on Salvation Army, just any of our local resources. And that's really how we are going to help those families.
So anything that would involve parent consent, like immunizations, things like that, you're working directly with the parents, and
Yes.
it's not just that students are coming in and they're getting shots at the school.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have absolutely nothing to do with that. It's working with the parent to say, okay, let's get this scheduled for your student. And then if I need to pay for that, then I can pay for that. But the parents have to be involved. Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying.
Absolutely. Talk to us a little bit about Spartan Stop.
Oh, that's my passion. The Spartan Stop is something that I identified as a need back in 2017 and actually got the community support to start it in March of 2017. In taking over the role as McKinney-Vento liaison, we identified that there's a lot of students who are unaccompanied. So that means that those kiddos are not with a parent or a guardian. And so they need a lot of additional support. And when you look into our community, those resources aren't available to students under 18 unless they have parental consent. And if they're not with a parent or guardian, they aren't going to have that consent. So I, at the time, went to Dr. Brent Hart and just said, hey, we got to do better for our kids. So I would like for you to back me in supporting this needs pantry. I'll get all the funding. And so we kind of got our heads together. We put a whole committee together and we worked to really identify the needs. So he worked on getting washing machine and dryers and providing the build out for a private shower. And I worked on getting the funding so that we could provide shoes and backpacks and clothes and hygiene products and all of those items. And so that's what we do at the high school for those students.
And that just reminds me that as we're going through construction at all of our different schools, that is one thing that we're looking at, is making sure that there's showers available to students. Occasionally we have situations, and then washers and dryers to help our students as well.
That is amazing, and it makes my heart so happy.
Talk to us about the work to provide food for students. So share about what that looks like and then how the community might be able to help assist in those efforts.
Okay, so are we talking about Food for Students, the program?
Everything, really everything. How, because I know there's different programs.
Yes.
And so,
Okay.
yeah, talk about each one, please.
A lot of times when we say Food for Students, there is a program called Food for Students. And it was started about 15 years ago by concerned community members that were challenged to look into our community, address a need, and help provide resources for it. So they got together and decided at that time that kids were going home over the weekend hungry and there wasn't a good resource to provide. So they pooled their thoughts, their ideas, their resources, everything, but a lot of it is just working hard to provide that. And so what they did is they found space. The Gazette provides space for them to house all of the food. They order it at cost from Goods Cash Saver. It's delivered by Thomas Transfer. And then every piece of it is all volunteer. So there's not a single penny that is used to pay anything other than to purchase the food. And so those bags are made and distributed to the schools and any student. And we're looking at our lowest, just the bottom of food insecurities. Like you're not going to be able to reach those that are kind of food insecure just because the resource it's so big. But so what we do is we provide take-home bags for kids that need them on Fridays for the weekend, and that's district-wide. And on that, as far as that program, I am on the board. So I'm the liaison between the program and our school district. And then I help with getting all of the orders for each month and then overseeing the delivery. And it's actually delivered by our transition students. And it's an amazing process that I love so much. The rest of that, as far as when we think about food for students, if it's not that program, the Spartan Stop also provides supplemental bags. And so some kiddos, that one little bag that comes from Food for Students is just not enough, especially if they have no other resource for food over the weekend. So my bags from Spartan Stop are going to be a lot more detailed to the student. So like, for example, if I know I have a student that's couch surfing, I'm going to give them everything that they need that they can literally go into a gas station and use their microwave and have a meal. So it might be a cup of noodles or a cup of mac and cheese or a soup can that has the pop top that you can just put it straight in the microwave. If it's a family that I'm trying to help and maybe there's a family that is living in poverty and there's 10 kids and we know that mom and dad are there, I'm going to give them more meal-friendly things. So maybe it's a big bag of noodles and a couple of big cans of cream of mushroom soup with some tuna, things that they can actually make a meal out of. So that's the kind of the difference. Beyond that, then we also refer to all of our local agencies and try to tap into those resources as well.
And we do have some great resources in the community.
Yes, Emporia is very fortunate. And we as a school district are very fortunate too that they've really backed the Spartan Stop and just everything that I do for families. and they are so giving and kind. We cannot do it without their support. So
I think this is a good time that when we think about a regular school day, because sometimes we have inclement weather and people ask, why do we try so hard to have school each and every day? It is because of our neediest students, making sure that they have a warm building to go to, that they have food, because some of those students, that is what they're relying on for their breakfast and lunch.
absolutely. And if their families aren't home because they have to go to work, then they're at home alone with nothing to eat. So yes, I am very sad when we don't have school.
So we try to make sure that we have school, or that if we ever have to delay, that there's a really good reason why we are delaying or why we are canceling.
And I appreciate that. So thank you for making all those hard decisions.
You're welcome. It helps the community, I think, sometimes to understand, because snow days should be fun.
Oh, yes.
It should be, or whatever the inclement weather is. I mean, ice is not fun ever, but snow days should be fun. But we have so many families that really, they just need us to be here so they can be here
As
well.
a mama, I would love to stay at home on a snow day, but as an employee, I know that that's just not a good idea. I totally understand.
Talk to us about what funding resources you use to help students.
Okay, so as far as funding goes, like I said before, it's all about community supports. So we're always accepting donations of goods and services and then monetary donations. We get a lot of donations from a lot of our service clubs, from community members, but then we also rely on grant funding as well. And we've gotten grants from many, many, many places. We've gotten it from the Boyer Fund, Emporia Community Foundation, United Way, Hopkins, Jones, Rebels, Earl and Louise Souter. There's just so many. It's takes a village, and it absolutely does. And I'm just so grateful for everyone that gives to us. So,
Well, if any parents or community members would be interested in donating, what would they need to do?
all they need to do is contact me. And we have a lot of families too that, like, just recently we had a little girl that had a birthday party and she didn't want any presents. So she asked them to make a donation to the Spartan Stop. So her mom reached out to me. She happened to be a district employee, but she reached out to me and said, can you please give me a list of items? And I got 4 huge boxes of stuff that we were
that's
really in need
awesome.
of. So yeah, just contact me at work or shoot me an email and I will get in touch with you and let you know what our needs are. It just varies by the day. So we just had another drive that we were really needing some hygiene products. But for her, I told her snack food and items that I could put in the bag. So anybody that wants to donate at any time. And also, we do have a shed in the back of the high school that we're taking clothing donations. And that was donated as well, which was amazing. And we can take those 24/7. But right now, I really want to stress that we're just needing kids' clothes. I get lots and lots of adult clothes, but really kids' clothes are what we're needing at this time. So that shed is always open if people have clothing that they want to donate.
So kids' clothes, what ages?
All ages.
Sizes.
Yeah, I would say all ages up through middle school.
Okay. So birth all the way through 13, 14 years old.
Yes. So what we do, if I don't utilize those donations throughout the year, once a year the district sponsors a big clothing drive, and it's always in November, and we take everything out of the shed and we get rid of all of it. And then we start over for the next year. So it's really important that I have enough kids' clothes.
Awesome. So if they need to email you, it's heather.wagner@usd253.net. And then
Yes.
call the high school number.
Yes, or my direct line for work is 620-341-2392.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Well, hopefully you'll get some interest and some donations after this, just sharing the information. Is there anything else that you would like to share with listeners?
I just want people to know how important it is that we have a role like mine and how wonderful it is that the district supports it, because I work with a lot of other school districts as well, and they don't have the capacity to do that. So I just feel like it's really supportive of our students, and I'm just grateful for your support and also the community support.
Absolutely. We have a great community. One of the things I love about Emporia is how giving Emporia community members are. They just, if you let them know what the need is, they come through every time.
Always, I agree.
Well, thank you, Heather. Appreciate you being here today.
Thanks for having me.
As we conclude this episode, we would like to remind our listeners that below the podcast link, there is a link to an electronic form for anyone to provide feedback or ideas about the podcast you may have just listened to, or to share ideas for future podcasts. We will end on our Emporia Public Schools mission statement. We engage, we empower, we inspire. Thank you for listening, and watch our upcoming episodes.